The Galactic Ecological Union had surveyed hundreds of worlds, some barren, some beautiful, some dangerous, but never had one drawn as much casual confidence as the unmarked blue and green sphere spinning calmly in a corner of the Sol system. It had been labeled a Class 5 biosphere, the highest threat level for living planets, yet the data was strangely incomplete. The Union sent in one of its finest teams, led by Commander Tival of the Varnak, a species known for logical thought and emotional detachment. He had explored volcanic moons, acid-swamped jungle planets, and even a rogue comet that supported crystalline predators. Nothing had shaken him. So, as the Varnak cruiser Vindicator approached this unnamed world, Tival and his team were more curious than cautious. They observed the swirling white clouds, the endless oceans, and the mix of terrains below. Everything looked ordinary, even peaceful. But the deeper they scanned, the stranger things became. First came the weather fluctuations, entire systems that shifted direction within hours, hurricane-force winds forming over warm seas, then vanishing. Then there were temperature jumps, not seasonal but erratic, deserts freezing overnight, and forests heating up in minutes. No weather model they ran held stable for more than a few minutes. The ship's instruments began to glitch as they entered the upper atmosphere. Electromagnetic spikes battered their shields, solar flares bounced oddly off the magnetic field, and a brief radiation pulse knocked out the secondary sensors. Tival raised an eye ridge. This wasn't chaos. It was organized chaos. Nature here didn't resist danger. It seemed to play with it. But still, the surface life readings were strong. Countless species, diverse climates, even signs of intelligent civilization. Despite the odd anomalies, Earth seemed to support life not just abundantly, but almost aggressively. It thrived in extremes. Intrigued more than alarmed, Tival authorized a planetary descent. As the Vindicator's shuttle glided through thick clouds, they spotted towering mountains, vast deserts, glowing cities, and what looked like entire continents designed by randomness. Volcanoes erupted alongside snowy peaks, forests bordered tundra, and lightning storms danced over calm lakes. One Varnak scientist, peering through a visual scope, muttered, "No planet should look like this." But they pressed on. Their descent brought them over what appeared to be a quiet rainforest. It pulsed with green, but not a calming kind. It was alive with hidden motion. Creatures darted under leaves, wings shimmered in sunlight, and sounds that didn't match any database echoed from all directions. The team noted hundreds of predator-prey dynamics happening simultaneously, none of which made sense by standard ecological rules. Plants moved. Insects swarmed with strategy. Even the trees seemed alert. One of the crew joked that the forest was watching them, but no one laughed. As they hovered lower, a flock of birds, each the size of a man, exploded from the canopy, their flight pattern resembling a military drill. The ship's AI flagged the maneuver as intelligent avoidance. Tival leaned forward. "Begin a full environmental sweep. We're landing." No one objected, but unease settled thickly in the cabin. From orbit, the planet had seemed beautiful. Up close, it was like standing at the edge of something ancient, wild, and completely unafraid. The Galactic Ecological Union had seen Deathworlds before, harsh, violent, raw. But they were predictable. This place was not. Earth didn't reject danger. It wore it like armor. And as the team prepared to make their first step on its soil, none of them realized they weren't just studying a planet. They were waking a legend. The landing was far more violent than any of them had prepared for. The shuttle's stabilizers struggled against sudden gusts of crosswinds, and a downdraft pulled the craft dangerously close to a jagged cliff before the pilot corrected. As the landing gear touched down on the muddy clearing deep within what appeared to be a temperate forest, the ground itself shifted slightly, almost as if irritated by the intrusion. Commander Tival and his team stepped out in full environmental suits, expecting to begin a standard scan. But within the first hour, protocol was forgotten. Nothing followed the rules here. A small rodent-like creature with shimmering fur darted past them, seemingly harmless, until one of the scientists bent down to scan it. In a blur of motion, it bit through the reinforced glove, injecting a toxin that caused the Varnak biologist to collapse in seconds. Emergency medical drones responded immediately, administering antivenoms synthesized on the spot, yet the creature was gone, vanished into the thick underbrush without a trace. Before the team could process the incident, a flock of skyborne predators, resembling avian reptiles, swept across the trees. Their talons cut into a steel drone like it was made of paper. Feathers scattered in the wind, each tipped with what analysis later revealed to be a mild paralytic compound. Even the trees were suspect. One vine reached toward a scanning device, wrapped around it, and attempted to pull it into a patch of jagged, tooth-like thorns. Everything here moved with purpose, either to feed, defend, or destroy. The air was filled with spores and pollen that irritated their filters, and the water in a nearby stream was found to be so biologically aggressive that it began corroding their collection sample tubes. Tuval watched all this unfold with growing discomfort. The planet was not just alive, it was testing them. Every creature, every plant, even the atmosphere seemed ready to attack anything foreign. But the true shock came later in the day, when the team, still reeling from a narrow escape involving a pack of burrowing predators, picked up energy readings from nearby terrain. Signs of a settlement, structured, deliberate, and unmistakably technological. At first, they thought it might be another Varnak expedition, or perhaps a lost outpost from another species. But as they neared the source, their scanners began detecting language signals, electromagnetic pulses, and even music. And then came the biosigns: humanoid, warm-blooded, and impossibly calm. Through thick trees and into a small valley, they finally saw them, humans, living in open structures made of stone and metal, walking casually through the forest paths, tending to gardens, and interacting with local animals like they were pets, not predators. Children ran barefoot near a pond known to be full of dangerous amphibians, and a woman laughed as a large bird landed on her arm. The humans wore no protective suits, used minimal visible technology, and seemed utterly unbothered by the dangers around them. Tuval stared, unable to speak for a long time. He ordered multiple scans, all confirming the same impossible reality. These fragile, unarmored beings were not just surviving. They were thriving in a deathworld that should have killed anything not evolved for constant combat. Were they manipulating the ecosystem? Had they conquered the planet somehow? Or were they simply so adapted to chaos that they no longer noticed it? One of the human settlers looked directly at the team's cloaked observation post and smiled. "You lost," she shouted across the distance, casual, friendly. Tuval pulled back, heart racing. This was not just a survey anymore. The Galactic Union had missed something crucial. Earth wasn't just a Class 5 world. It was home to a species that made the impossible seem normal. The classification systems, the threat levels, the entire understanding of survival, all of it might need to change. Because if humans were truly native to this place, then either evolution had made them into the most adaptable species in the galaxy, or they were absolutely insane. Descending into the Andes with uncertainty heavy in the air, Commander Tuval and his team approached the human settlement they had observed earlier, expecting a tense or even fearful reception. Galactic history had often shown that early contact species reacted with superstition, fear, or outright aggression when faced with the unknown. But as they crossed into the bounds of the high-altitude village nestled among the cliffs, what they encountered instead was casual curiosity. Humans waved at the strange newcomers in shimmering biosuits like it was the most normal thing in the world. One older man sipping a steaming drink simply nodded and said, "You folks don't look from around here. Need directions?" It was disarming. The Varnak team exchanged glances, momentarily speechless. The settlement was humble but efficient. Stone and metal structures braced against the fierce winds, solar panels on rooftops, and children running freely through uneven terrain, barefoot, playing games that involved dodging rocks and climbing sheer walls. A teenage girl approached, eyes bright with amusement, and asked if the aliens were doing some kind of weird cosplay, before inviting them to join her family's meal. Tuvol, still recovering from the venomous bite incident earlier, tried to explain the dangers they had faced. The humans just laughed. "You think that's bad?" "I got bit by a rattlesnake when I was 9, said a small boy with messy hair and a wide grin. "Then I got hit by lightning the year after. Grandma says I attract excitement." Another man, chopping wood nearby, added, "He's fine. Grew up tougher because of it. Earth teaches you fast." These words confused the Varnak deeply. Where the Union had classified this world as nearly uninhabitable, the humans saw it as home. They spoke about bears in the forest like common pests, mentioned snowstorms that stranded them for days, and joked about tornadoes flipping trucks. One woman recounted a childhood memory of swimming through floodwaters to rescue her cat. "It's just normal," she said, shrugging. "Part of life, you know." But Tuvol didn't know. None of his training could explain how these fragile beings survived here with such ease and humor. Then came the quake. The ground trembled first, subtly, like a warning whisper. But in seconds it became a roar. The mountains shook, rocks tumbled from nearby cliffs, and buildings rattled with terrifying force. The Varnak team reacted instinctively, drawing shields and scanning for threats. One crew member tripped, another dropped vital equipment. It was chaos, until the humans moved. With astonishing speed and clarity, the villagers sprang into action. The teenage girl yelled for everyone to get to the safe ridge, while the woodcutter lifted debris off a stunned alien with one arm and carried him across the shaking earth. Children guided panicking Varnak to solid ground, navigating paths they clearly knew by heart. A woman, barely 5 feet tall, calmly secured the alien equipment crates, strapping them to a sled dragged by 2 sturdy animals. When the tremors passed, not a single human was panicked. Breathing hard but smiling, they brushed dust off their clothes like nothing happened. "That one wasn't even a big one," someone muttered. "Last year's was way worse." Tuvol stood among them stunned. His team, brilliant minds, elite explorers, had been reduced to frightened observers, while these humans handled catastrophe like routine. Not because they were fearless, but because they were prepared. Earth had shaped them this way. Through fire, flood, beast and storm, humanity had adapted, not just physically but mentally. Where others would see danger and retreat, they saw challenge and responded. Something shifted in Tuvol then. Earth was not a death world to its people. It was a proving ground. A teacher. And its students, the humans, were perhaps the most resilient species the galaxy had never truly understood. Commander Tuvol could no longer rely on assumption or outdated records. After the quake and the humans' calm reaction to it, he initiated a full investigation into their biology, psychology, and recorded history. What began as a study soon turned into an unsettling revelation. Humans were not just another sentient species. Everything about them defied the natural limits known to the Galactic Ecological Union. Their bodies were built not for comfort or efficiency, but for survival in the harshest of conditions. They were endurance predators, able to chase prey for hours, even days without rest, something no Varnak or allied species could even attempt. Their muscle structure was deceptively strong, not for brute power like some species, but for durability, for movement through hostile terrain, and for enduring long-term stress. Their immune systems, Tuvol discovered with surprise, were highly aggressive and adaptive. Where a Varnak would fall to a single strain of poison or infection, a human body could not only resist it, but build permanent immunity after surviving exposure. Some human children were even vaccinated deliberately by injecting them with weakened forms of diseases, an idea that horrified the alien medical researchers. More fascinating still was their climate adaptability. Humans thrived in polar ice, in deserts, jungles, high altitudes, and deep oceans. Their bodies regulated heat and cold through sweating, shivering, and even behavioral choices, showing a level of flexible adaptation rarely seen in the galaxy. But biology was only half the story. Their minds were something else entirely. Humans were driven not just by logic, but by emotion and imagination, an unpredictable but incredibly powerful combination. They were curious, even in the face of danger. They would climb mountains that could kill them just to see the top. They would dive into oceans to learn what lived beneath. They dreamed of traveling to other planets long before they had the technology to do so. Even more alarming was their stubbornness. Tuval read hundreds of accounts of humans refusing to quit, even when facing certain death. Soldiers holding positions against overwhelming odds, explorers pushing into deadly terrain with nothing but hope and grit, entire populations rebuilding after disasters that would have ended most civilizations. He found their history was marked not by long periods of peace, but by endless cycles of challenge and survival, ice ages, plagues, massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts. And yet, humanity endured. They didn't just rebuild, they advanced. Through every catastrophe, they grew stronger. And then somehow, they built cities, invented art, dreamed of stars, and even wrote songs to the universe. Earth itself now made more sense. Its violence, unpredictability, and danger wasn't a flaw. It was a crucible. A world that constantly tested its inhabitants, forcing them to evolve or die. And humans, they hadn't just survived Earth. They had tamed it, learned from it, and chosen to remain. No species had ever willingly stayed on a world this hazardous. Most civilizations relocated to safer planets, colonized stable environments, or developed controlled habitats. But not humanity. They looked at the chaos and said, "This is home." The realization spread across the Varnak crew like a chill. These weren't just inhabitants of a Deathworld. They were the ultimate product of it, shaped by fire, ice, storm, and tooth. Earth didn't break them. It forged them. And they didn't leave. They never even tried. In the quiet of the evening, while reviewing one final report, Tuval looked out over the ridges of the Andes, where humans built their lives without fear. His tentacle curled tightly against his chest in an involuntary sign of awe. He understood now. These creatures were not mad. They were not reckless. They were simply something the galaxy had never seen before, apex survivors, born of the deadliest world known, and still smiling through it all. The moment the Raks intercepted the Varnak crew's findings, their leaders convened in urgency. Known across the galaxy for their aggressive expansion and belief in dominance by force, the Raks saw the existence of Earth and its resilient inhabitants not as a marvel, but a threat. A species that could survive extinction events and master a Deathworld without advanced galactic aid was dangerous, unpredictable, and worst of all, unaligned. They moved swiftly. A fleet of sharp, angular warships pierced Earth's orbit, cloaked under the guise of containment, but with every weapon primed for subjugation. They made landfall in a forgotten military installation deep in a jungle, where concrete structures stood cracked and rusted, long abandoned by human governments, but still rooted in strategic geography. With weapons raised and declarations blaring in harsh tones, the Raks demanded humanity's surrender. But what met them was not fear. It was silence. Cold, steady silence from a group of humans standing in the distance. No panic, no retreat, just calm faces and steady eyes. It confused the Raks, who were used to fear being their first ally. Then the jungle answered. A sudden roar split the sky as a flash flood came cascading through the valley, triggered by an unexpected downpour upstream. The Raks, unfamiliar with Earth's brutal spontaneity, scrambled to hold position. Their landing ships were swept from their pads and crashed into cliffsides. Thick clouds of steam hissed up from volcanic vents that cracked the soil open like angry mouths. Giant insects, disturbed by seismic activity, swarmed from the trees, clogging Raks' ventilation systems and forcing troops to seal their armor. But Earth was only the beginning of their troubles. Humans began to appear not in organized armies, but in patchwork clusters. Farmers with old tools, scavengers with modified equipment, mechanics hauling crates of scrap that would soon be reshaped into barricades and traps. They didn't wait for orders from a central government. They acted. An old woman led a team of children to redirect a muddy stream into the rack's supply lines. A group of bikers built spike traps from melted rebar. A retired engineer rewired a satellite dish to interfere with the rack's comm systems. It wasn't chaos, it was instinctive unity. The kind born from generations of surviving everything nature and man could throw at them. Commander Tuval and his crew watched in stunned disbelief. They were scientists, not soldiers, and the thought of resisting the racks had never crossed their minds. But the humans didn't resist, they outmaneuvered. They didn't match the racks in power, they unraveled them through adaptability. They used the terrain like a weapon, the weather like a shield, and knowledge like a blade. The racks would secure a small section of the base, only to find the humans had already mined the road behind them. One moment, their assault vehicles were moving forward, then sinking into swamps cleverly disguised with reflective blankets. The racks didn't understand what was happening. They had trained for wars against fleets, against laser turrets and automated defenses, not against clever hands and fierce hearts who could see every flaw in a machine's armor. The breaking point came when a human group with nothing more than modified hunting rifles and handmade camouflage overran a rack's command post during a thunderstorm. No advanced weaponry, no orbital support, just timing, teamwork, and sheer, unrelenting grit. The rack's commander, injured and shocked, sent a retreat signal before losing connection completely. As the ships lifted off in defeat, Earth remained below, unchanged, unbroken, and wholly unbuffered. The Varnak crew recorded the aftermath in quiet awe. What had begun as a survey of a curious planet had become a revelation. The galaxy's fiercest conquerors had been driven away, not by superior weapons, but by a species so hardened by its environment that war was just another storm to ride out. Earth, the Deathworld, had once again proven its rule. And humanity, its wild, clever children, had sent an undeniable message without ever saying a word: no one conquers Earth. Commander Tuval stood at the center of the Union Hall, a place where truths were spoken and careers were often ended by them. The chamber buzzed with tension, filled with representatives of hundreds of species, all waiting to hear the report from the team that had stepped onto Earth. Screens floated mid-air, showing fragmented footage of the rack's invasion and the surprising resistance mounted by humanity. Many in the audience still wore disbelief on their faces. How could a species from a so-called backwater planet have driven off one of the most feared military powers in the galaxy? But Tuval was not here to speak of humiliation or retaliation. He raised his hand, quieting the crowd, and began not with numbers or graphs, but with a story, a moment when a human child laughed about being struck by lightning. A ripple of confusion moved through the room, but Tuval pressed on, describing the storm, the panic of the Varnak crew, and how that same child helped them find shelter. He showed images of farmers who built defenses, civilians who coordinated like trained officers, and the terrain itself turning against the racks. Then he showed what they had uncovered in Earth's history: asteroid strikes, ice ages, global plagues, wars both civil and planetary, and humanity surviving them all, not through brute strength, but through adaptation, creativity, and above all, sheer will. He paused, then looked at the High Chancellor. Earth is not a death world because it is unlivable, he said. It is a death world because it demands greatness to survive. Murmurs echoed through the chamber. The Rax delegation scoffed, trying to shift the conversation back to security concerns. They accused humanity of being unpredictable, of harboring violence in their hearts. But Tuval turned their argument on its head. And yet, when the Rax came with weapons drawn, it was not the humans who fired first, he said. It was they who defended, not invaded. They who protected their home, and I must add, ours as well. He revealed that without human intervention, the Varnak team would have perished in the jungle's chaos, consumed by the planet's own raw power. He reminded the Union that if Earth truly bred monsters, they would not be here asking for unity, they would be conquering stars. The debate dragged on for days. Whispers ran through diplomatic halls, messages pulsed across interstellar channels, and speculation spread like wildfire. Some still feared Earth, some admired it, but no one could ignore the truth any longer. The humans had not only survived a confrontation with the Orcs, they had made the galaxy reconsider what strength truly looked like. Finally, the vote came. By a narrow margin, the Union made a historic decision. Earth would not be categorized as a volatile zone. It would not be watched from afar like a dangerous animal. Instead, it would be welcomed as an equal, with full representation. The announcement sent a wave of shock and awe through the galactic network. Tuvol, though worn and exhausted, stood proud. He had risked everything to speak honestly, and the truth had changed everything. The Orcs, shamed and silenced, withdrew from Earth and the surrounding systems. Their defeat, both military and political, echoed through their once feared empire. Meanwhile, on Earth, most humans went on with their lives unaware of the galactic shift they had caused, fixing cars, teaching classes, baking bread, tending fields. But a few, those who had fought in the jungle, who had helped the alien survey team, watched the skies now with new eyes. They knew something had changed. Across the stars, civilizations once too advanced to notice Earth were now watching it with cautious respect. They had thought they knew Deathworlds. Then they met Earth. And now the galaxy stood at the beginning of something new, something shaped by those who had endured the impossible and still dared to dream. Years had passed since Earth stunned the galaxy with its unshakable will and unmatched adaptability. What was once seen as a primitive world buried in chaos was now a respected pillar of the Galactic Union. No longer overlooked or underestimated, humanity had carved out its place among the stars, not through dominance, but through resilience, curiosity, and a relentless drive to grow. Earth's scientists were now some of the most sought-after minds in xenobiology, terraforming, and disaster response. Their knowledge of chaotic environments, honed over millennia of surviving floods, wildfires, earthquakes, and more, proved to be invaluable to worlds struggling with instability. Human survival academies opened on moons and stations across the galaxy, drawing recruits from dozens of species eager to learn what it meant to endure and adapt. These camps taught more than physical toughness. They taught cooperation under pressure, creative thinking in crisis, and how to find hope when everything seems lost. It wasn't just their bodies that endured, it was something deeper. Commander Tuvol, now a seasoned diplomat with silvered mandibles and wiser eyes, returned to Earth to observe one such survival camp deep in the Canadian Rockies. What he saw left him quietly moved. Young humans and aliens alike trudged through mud, climbed steep ridges, built shelters under a cold rain, and laughed through the challenges. A Grolan cadet helped a limping human trainee cross a river. A Martari healer worked side by side with an Earthborn medic to treat a sprained ankle. No barriers, no fear, just unity built through shared hardship. Tuvol stood near the edge of the camp beside another ambassador, his old friend from the Dalen Confederacy. They watched the trainees set up campfires and cook with minimal supplies, joking and singing beneath a wide grey sky. They thought they knew Deathworlds, Tuvol said softly, his voice almost lost in the wind. But Earth didn't just survive one, it raised a species who could master them. That was humanity's quiet power. Not brute force, not technological supremacy. It was the way they faced the worst and still found ways to laugh. The way they treated failure as just another lesson, pain as a price of growth, and danger as something to prepare for, not fear. Their history was proof of this, surviving everything from extinction-level events to self-made disasters, and still choosing to build, to hope, to reach out. Their spirit was what the galaxy needed, even if it hadn't realized it at first. That same spirit now inspired once cautious species to take risks, to explore unknown systems, and to rebuild damaged worlds instead of abandoning them. In the years since joining the Union, humans had shared more than knowledge. They shared music that stirred the soul of species who had never understood rhythm. They shared stories of loss and triumph, passed down through firelit nights and digital archives. They taught others that strength didn't always roar. It sometimes whispered in the quiet act of standing back up. Earth had become more than a symbol of survival. It was a reminder that the harshest places could still give rise to kindness, creativity, and courage. As night fell over the camp, Tivol looked to the sky, once a barrier between species, now a bridge. Ships passed silently in low orbit, some human, some alien, all part of something bigger than any one world. The ambassador beside him spoke. "They don't conquer planets. They connect them." Tivol nodded, yes, and they do it not with fear, but with open arms and iron will. He knew then that Earth had not just earned its place in the galaxy, it had elevated it. And somewhere, out in the cold dark of space, some unknown world would one day whisper a distress call, and it would be humans who answered, not for conquest, not for glory, but because that's who they were: survivors, guardians, friends.